Hello, everybody. Um, I wanted to talk about Dune, and I haven't put anything up on my channel for ages, and I recently discovered that it's really easy to just go live, as opposed to filming something and editing it. So basically, I'm a lazy bastard, and let's talk about Dune, by Frank Herbert. I have wanted to make a video talking about Dune for absolutely ages. In fact, I went so far as to record a video about, oh, forgive me, itchy nose, about me talking about the Dune series all the way back in March. And what happened with that was I discovered I didn't like editing the video, so I stopped editing the video, and it never made it onto YouTube. So it's been a while. Hopefully, I will still have things to say. I know I will. It's Dune. How can I not have things to say about Dune? So Dune, Frank Herbert novel, 1965, something like that, is an entire book series. There are 6 books in the series. First of all, let's put up a spoiler warning. The first part of this video is going to be me talking about why I love Dune and why you should watch Dune. Why you should read Dune. Although the entire video is basically you should read Dune. That should be that should be the new title of the video. Yes, so we'll start there, and then we'll talk about more specifics and about what kind of happens as the story goes along throughout all 6 books, and how Frank Herbert weaves a narrative together that is completely unlike anything I have ever experienced before, and I've read a lot. So, first of all, this book by Frank Herbert is so good. It is about a lot, but mostly it is about a young man named Paul Atreides. His family are taking over the world of Arrakis by order of the Emperor. There's a galactic feudal system going on. And on Arrakis, it is the desert planet on which the one resource everybody in the universe wants most is grown. This is the spice melange, which has a bunch of properties, which include but are not limited to giving you longevity. You can live to be like 300 years old if you continue to eat this spice. Unlocking ancestral memories if you do a particular ritual and you're a secret organization called the Bene Gesserit. It can unlock visions of the future in certain genetic lines. It allows space navigators to track their course through space. It's a big deal. And everybody wants it, and therefore it is the basis of the entire economy of the known universe. It's very cool. It's very cool. The Atreides have an enemy household called the Harkonnens. They don't like each other, and conflict ensues. Dune. Forgive me, I'm just listening to people walking around the house. I don't know what's going on back there. Maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have waited until I knew there was going to be peace and stillness, but I didn't, and here we are. So that's kind of, he has to, yes, so Paul ends up having to fulfill his potential and grow up and fight the Harkonnens, and deal with the system of the universe, which is very much stacked against the Atreides. All while learning about this new world that has a lot of secrets, and a lot of really interesting stuff happens. In terms of what the meat of the book is, it explores a lot of humanity. It explores a lot of politics. So those kind of like pitfalls that human beings fall into, the way our minds work, the the honor and valor versus the hedonism and depravity, but also, the the there's a fundamentalness about it all. Humanity is portrayed in a very at first when I read it, I thought it was almost cynical because it doesn't have that romantic sheen on it. It presents people very clearly as who they are. And that's a mixed bag. Even his father, Leto Atreides, is this fantastic military commander and inspires incredible loyalty in his men. But, he's a war guy. He orders raids and attacks and makes political moves and is ruthless at times. And, loves his son and loves his partner, but makes decisions that do hurt them for their benefit. So there is, yeah, and the hero is not arguably a hero by the end, which is an interesting thing. But the thing about that is that when people are heroic and do have moments of incredible compassion, those feel as special as they do in the real world, in our actual lives. When people, I don't know about you guys, but in the real world, when somebody outside of my family does something with something kind and compassionate towards me, it feels like a momentous event. It is something I remember and cherish very deeply for my life. It's funny how these things stand out. In any case, Dune is incredibly well written. The third-person prose flow very well between all of the different characters, and it will switch perspectives to get the most interesting take on what is going on at any given moment. So that, if there's a dinner party going on and somebody says something, and the person we are currently following in terms of like being in their head and in their thoughts wouldn't read into it, then he will very seamlessly and with great skill transition into the mind of somebody else at the dinner table who will be able to see deeper into it. And so, yes, what you've heard about the David Lynch movie is true. It's a terrible film. Yes, this book is full of thoughts and people thinking, but the reason for that is because it investigates so deeply and richly the way people think, and the way that people work things out is part of the explanation of an exploration of the world that he's setting up, the grander fictional world. These people, yeah, are used to are used to a system that is in the future and is not immediately relatable to us, and exploring their thoughts and going through it that way is a really good way of getting to know the world through people who know it very well, as opposed to having somebody who's completely new to everything, like the amnesiac protagonist or something like that. Instead, we are in the minds of the most capable people. We are following the most important lines of action that are going on, and that is fantastic. I much prefer that to, oh, you're young and you're an apprentice, and so you must learn everything from scratch, and you grew up in a sheltered part of the world. Not at all. Not at all. The first Dune novel stands on its own. He only ever intended it to be one book originally. So what I recommend for you is to go and pick up the first book and read it. Do it. Like, the rest of the video is surplus. The rest of the books are surplus, and they are dependent on your enjoyment of them is dependent on whether or not you like the first one. So I'm not one of those, but at the same time, liking the first Dune novel is not equivalent to liking all of them. This is not one of those series like Harry Potter where you recommend the entire series to somebody. This is very much the case where I can recommend the first book, and the first book has adventure and action and politics and humanity and incredible ephemeral imagery and high concepts in it, and so can kind of get a wider audience involved. The later books lean more in one direction or the other. And so people who like one or the other will either enjoy or enjoy less the sequels. Which was my experience was that I love that stuff, so I'm so hooked. Fantastic. So let's go ahead and talk a little bit spoilerifically, not hugely, but broad strokes about the sequels. So the first Dune novel, obviously, as I said, stands on its own and has beginning, middle, and end. It is perfectly satisfying to end after the first Dune book. In fact, that's what I did the first time I read it. So I read it in isolation. I knew vaguely somewhere that there were more of them, but I never picked them up. So I read it. I absolutely loved it on my first read through, to the point where I picked it up again about a year ago, and I read it for the second time, and I got so much more out of it. I was so glad that I did that. And then I was given the second and third books by my dad, and so I read those, and then I picked up the other ones because I couldn't stop after those. The second Dune novel is called Dune Messiah. It is shorter than the first one by quite a lot, and very much it has an expansion of world building. So you get a little bit of a closer look at a new faction that was not present in the first book, the Bene Tleilaxu, and you get closer looks at the Spacing Guild and the Bene Gesserit as Paul continues his journey. So this is Paul is the hero again, and this one deals much more with the fact of the problems of the Oracle. Like I said, the spice can unlock future sight, can unlock the ability to see the future in somebody. And there's spoilers. This is why there's a spoiler warning. In the first book, Paul gains the ability to see the future, or see possible futures, which solidify. And the result breaks him. He can see so much of the future that he's trying to guide humanity down a path that doesn't end in its own destruction. And the result is that he can't do anything surprising. That he has to be self-sacrificial in a way, in order to make the futures that he's seen come to pass, or the other ones not come to pass, rather. And Frank Herbert spends a lot of time in Dune Messiah attempting to explain what can't be explained in words, and that's his own description of it, is characters speaking about being able to see the future and this experience which cannot translate properly into words. But if you take all of what is said by Paul about being able to see the future, if you take everything that he says to everybody in the book, the totality of it, the impressions of it on you as a reader, create this tapestry which gives you an impression of what it is like for him. And even if it becomes more concrete in terms of like being able to put your finger on it exactly, it will never become it will become more concrete but never fully solid. And that is an incredible feat to give the impression of this tapestry, of this experience, without it ever being able to be locked down and completely comfortable in your mind. So I love that. The second book is harder to get through, though, because of that. It's harder to go through because a lot of the book is Paul talking in this way that is not entirely clear. And he's always referencing something that is coming. Uh, so there's a part of the book that is hard to read through, but when you make it through and you make it to the climax of this book, it is so juicy. It is such a fantastic resolution to everything that has happened, and everything that he's been talking about starts to make more sense. Um, so definitely a good read. Let's talk about Children of Dune. It's Dune Book 3. Third Dune novel. Picks up with Paul's twin children, who who are young, young rulers. Rulers. They are young in body but old in mind. This book continues to be political and involves the future of this empire and the political struggles between these different factions that have been set up in the first two books, but really focuses in, rather than on the oracular and what's about seeing the future, focuses in on a different ability which is touched on in the first book, which is this ability of ancestral memory. If you've played any Assassin's Creed games, they ripped off Dune to make the Animus. So there's a ritual that the Bene Gesserit can go through, which gives them ancestral memories of their female line all the way back to Eve. But it is a limited form of it. And their goal of creating a Kwisatz Haderach, don't worry about it. That's what Paul becomes, is somebody who, it literally means the person who is in many places at once, the person who can see the future and all of their ancestral memories and be in the present at the same time. The unexpected result of his having children is that his children, as well as his sister from the first book, and that's again something they touched on in that, have the ancestral memories of all of their ancestors in their minds. And so Paul's sister Alia, as well as these two children, are dealing with the concept of having ancestral memory and what it is like for these personalities of these people who have died to manifest themselves in your mind and to crowd and to want a voice and to therefore be like interacting with one another and with you, and what it means to succumb to that and how one overcomes it. It's a fascinating idea. And the idea that these shadows of people who have died, these shadows of your parents, being able to remember your parents in bed, being able to remember every romantic encounter that has ever transpired between all of your ancestors, all of the languages, all of the memories, just all of the experience that you have. These little children who are like 6 now, or like 7 when the book takes place, are actually millions of years. Well, no, are actually like thousands upon thousands upon thousands of years old. Absolutely fascinating science fiction concepts, which is what you want out of a sci-fi series. Read Dune. Read it. Children of Dune is fantastic. I highly recommend it. And and serves as a really fantastic sequel. And the thing about Children of Dune is that it gives, and this is one of the brilliant things about the Dune series as a whole, is it further gives context to what happened in the second book and what happened in the first book. So in the second book especially, you have this person who can see very far into the future, and we get a very satisfying conclusion to that book, but what Paul has seen goes far beyond the end of that book. And as we deal with the events of the third book, we are still within the events that Paul saw. And so things that he put in place, things that his children see that contradict what he did, um, his son having a different vision of the future than his father did, and further being able to live in the consequences of the actions that ended the second book. It's a fascinating way of giving greater importance to what has already come before, which doesn't feel like a retcon or a cheat, because it isn't a retcon or a cheat. It's just living in the consequences and having the hindsight to recontextualize what you've seen. So going into book 4 is really fascinating because it does that on a grander scale. Book 4 takes place 3,500 years later. So first book happens, second book happens like 12 years later, third book happens like 10 years after that, and then the fourth book happens 3,500 years in the future. Um, the world is the universe rather has changed an incredible amount. It's like being introduced to a new world, but with like familiar faces. In one case, literally. In other cases, like the Bene Gesserit are still around, the Guild are still around. These like factions are still around, and we have a couple of characters who remain. I'm not going to share how, but they do, and we get even greater information on certain factions and on technological developments that are happening over 3,500 years later. In any case, the fourth book is one that I'm not going to say most, it is the most divisive of the Dune novels in terms of if people enjoy it or not. And I understand why, because the fourth book, God Emperor of Dune is what it's called, is entirely about the experience of one person. It it is the book in which least physically happens, and we get again a lot of talk from somebody about what their experience is like living. This person has merged and become a symbiotic worm person. Dune, I don't know if I mentioned this, is the book with the first giant sandworms ever in fiction, and nobody has come even close to getting it as doing it as well since. They're so fantastic. They're such a fantastic part of the world building. So this person has fused with a worm and lives a life where they are no longer human. And it's about that experience, and it's about that person talking about what his experience is and this life that he has led that is so self-sacrificial. He never gets to be intimate with anybody. He outlives everyone. He's entirely lonely. He's a lonely being, and his role is to be despised. His role is to be despised by human beings and ultimately to be overcome by human beings in an attempt to save us, in an attempt to this is kind of a spoiler, I guess, but to expand human beings and create such infinite potential in scattering us, that no one thing can ever wipe us all out. And we will only continue to grow because that is all that we will be able to do. We will have to evolve. We will continue to challenge each other and re-meet each other. But that doesn't become clear that that's what he's doing, even in that book. He says that he is saving humanity. He says he's leading us down a golden path. And it is about his experience, and it is about how to convey, and about that tipping point when it all comes crashing down. So most divisive of the books, because the least amount happens, and it is such a slow, introspective story. But for those of you who like that and are interested in the ramifications of what it's talking about, especially in terms of giving context to what has already happened and setting up the direction that the series goes in, because again, we have characters who can see the direction and are conveying not necessarily what that direction is, but what it means. And so we have a vague sense of what the direction is without ever getting specifics. Nobody ever said, and there's a reason they do it, but the people who can see the future never go, in 100 years' time, you're going to see a starburst, and the magic pliers of infinitum will be invented. This is not, this faction will fall on this date, these people will do this thing. Telling people that locks them into a future that is defined by you telling them that. And that sense of the Oracle is very thoroughly explored in this series. So you get this hint at the real purpose of this story and this fictional universe's arc in book 4. Books 5 and 6, Heretics of Dune and Chapter House Dune, respectively, kind of are two parts of the same book in my mind. The style shifts again. It is much sexier, and people fight and fuck. They fight and they have sex. And so there's a lot more action. It's a lot faster paced. And the 5th book feels more shallow because of that. But if you read it as though it's the first part and book 6 is the second part, the overall is just as good as all of the books that have come before it. And what book 6 does magnificently is they're dealing with another faction over the course of these two books. We're seeing different alliances, new political situations, and this 6th book truly shows you the point of the entire series. It is an ending where not all threads are tied up neatly, but that's the point. The point of the Dune series is to showcase a future where we are still human, where we are still as flawed as we have always been, and yet there is a hopeful future for us. One of my favorite sci-fi series is Star Trek, because of that optimism that we will become better, that our future will involve, evolving beyond bigotry, will involve evolving beyond material greed, and what the future will look like because of that. But Dune says, what if we don't evolve beyond material greed? What if we don't evolve beyond bigotry and selfishness and all this stuff, and yet we still are are headed into a future whose possibilities are too infinite to know. We will never know what the future is of Dune, and that's what's part of what makes it magnificent. We will never know, you know, what every single colony of human being does in this series, and what the technological shifts will be, and what the genetic shifts will accomplish, you know? But that's the point, is that it's so big and so magnificent that it will just continue to grow. Thank you so much for watching. This is a new style of video that I am putting together. For the moment, I don't have a proper recording space. I don't like editing my own stuff, and so these things are going to be stream of consciousness for the moment. I might switch and do them on my phone because that's a nicer camera, and then upload them as opposed to doing them live, but I haven't decided yet. When I move into new space, I will see what setup I can make. So yeah, I'm going to be putting a lot more content on this channel for the first time in a very long time, just because of the ease of setting this up. So I will be able to make half-hour long videos. I'll be able to make 5-minute long videos, and there won't be editing. These will not be super slick or up to the YouTube standard of entertainment, or up to the booktuber standard of entertainment, but they will be there, and I will get to talk about all the stuff that I want to talk about, and hopefully help to continue to make a presence for myself. So look forward to more videos. I've got a few things that I want to talk about. I've got my backlog reviews series, which I never continued because, again, I don't like editing. I will definitely going to continue a version of those. The backlog reviews will be for things that I have played or read or watched potentially a long time ago, and I will talk about. I also will want to be talking about Dungeons and Dragons. I'll also be wanting to talk about, work opportunities and things that have come up for me, as well as like projects that I am working on. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It's gonna be fun. Alrighty, guys. Thanks so much for watching once again. Like and subscribe if you would like to, and look forward to. So this is kind of like my informal platform, where there's just going to be a lot of stuff that I'm able to talk about. Obviously, I am a writer and an actor, so if you want to be able to keep up with things that I'm actually involved in, and things that are more real entertainment than this, because I know this isn't real entertainment, in terms of the quality that I am giving to it, should be of a higher standard if I wanted people to enjoy it for what it is. But I do hope that people do find enjoyment in it. Right. Yes, so this is kind of like a support thing for the actual thing. Take care, everybody.